Sorry for the late starts. I shouldn't even mention it. You're supposed to just pretend those things don't happen, but we don't do that here. It's Wednesday. What is it? Day 3 or day 2.5 of this Trump administration. And we'll talk today about 5 things the deep state loves. And consequently, there are 5 things that Team Trump must seek to destroy. And I think they're doing a good job at that. So we'll address this with the help of Renew.Healthcare. It's where I go to get the ethically gathered stem cells that have been just absolutely unbelievably miraculous to me. And of course they are, because they're God's creation. So thank you, God Almighty, for an opportunity to speak again together.
The Todd Herman Show is 100% disapproved by big pharma, technocrats, and tyrants everywhere. No. From the high mountains of free America, here's the Emerald City exile, Todd Herman.
Today is the day the Lord has made, and these are the times through which God has decided we shall live. Funny thing about families. Even in very tumultuous families, really dysfunctional families, we are hardwired to love our families. And kids are hardwired to love their parents, even abusive parents. And part of this is a survival strategy that God's installed into our minds. That is that we need to feel loved. And kids will convince themselves that this is how my parents love me because the alternative is too painful. You know, my dad beats me or, God forbid, abuses me, sexually. But this is how they love. Because the alternative is I'm not loved. So that's family, and I certainly don't think of the government as family. But people who work in environments like that are really dysfunctional, they'll still develop a love for those environments. And it's sort of like that family thing, that you have to love where you work in order to stay there for a lot of people. A lot of people just exist within their jobs and just hate their jobs. But God sort of wired this into this. Which brings me to a guy named Speaker Mike Johnson. Well, that's his name. His name is Mike Johnson. His title is Speaker of the House. So Mike Johnson is a guy that I firmly believe loves Jesus, but doesn't trust him. And look, hey, I'm guilty. I try in my own mind to creatively imagine my future and just things I will do and just removing God from that and kind of forgetting that, wait, you own the future. And I saw this when Mike Johnson was absolutely 100% against surveilling Americans. He was a question mark on that, didn't want it. And then all of a sudden he had a meeting with the FBI and came out and said, yeah, we got to do this. I'm all in. When he had an opportunity to stop the Democrats from harming kids under the guise of gender therapy, he had the opportunity to force that to halt in a budget bill, and he didn't do it. Why? Because Ukraine. To me, that communicates the love of Jesus, but not trusting him. Like, so what if the government shut down? Now, perhaps Mike Johnson was right, because here's President Trump, and I haven't yet seen action on Ukraine, but I think we're gonna. I've seen a freezing of foreign aid and a 90-day halt on that, praise God. I've seen Marco Rubio put out a statement to the State Department. He's now Secretary of State, saying, hey, if you have a speaking engagement or you're going to a panel or a conference, no. You have to resubmit for permission to do that to make sure it aligns with America's values as we're going to express them, which is going to be America first. I saw the one flag only rule. These are all very good steps. At the same time, I see Section 702 surviving, and this is where they get to surveil Americans. They have a sneaky way of doing it. Oh, we're just looking at phone calls to foreign entities or from foreign entities. And yeah, some people get caught up in the dragnet. Well, that's unfortunate. I don't think that's a bug. I think it's a feature. But Mike Johnson said something that people focused on the figurehead. That's not where my focus begins. My focus begins with Mike Johnson deciding to not tell us something until now. And I find that really unconscionable. Then we'll go through these 5 things that the deep state loves and that Team Trump must destroy if we want to get a republic back. So we're 2.5 days in. Already the economic climate is changing. President Trump made this announcement about the $500 billion AI project, Stargate. Now, people who are fans of science fiction are looking at this going, you had to call it Stargate? And people like me who question the so-called public health authorities and the pharma industrial military complex, because that's what it is. And you see the CEO of Oracle coming out and saying, hey, man, we're going to release a bunch of code in your body. If you get sick, we're going to use AI to figure out a custom drug right on the spot, 48 hours. And I'm looking at that going, not for me. But it's a massive change to the economy. So question is, are you positioned to benefit from this? Well, in my judgment, if your portfolio is not actively managed, no. Are you positioned to deal with the risk from this? Because the claim here is this is going to create hundreds of thousands of jobs for Americans. I can't think of a time where AI created jobs. That's not its job. Its job is to steal jobs. So are you positioned for that? My friend Zach Abraham is doing his first free live webinar of the year. He's going to look at these news events and how they're likely to affect all of our retirement portfolios. It's free to attend. He'll talk about the performance through the year, how they're dealing with risk management, and how active management of portfolios can actually reduce risk and volatility. It is free, but you got to register to attend. So go to knowyourriskradio.com. That's KNOW, knowyourriskradio.com. Register for that. And remember this. Investments involve risk and are not guaranteed. Past performance doesn't guarantee future results. This service is offered through Trek Financial LLC, and past performance doesn't guarantee future results. Did I say that part already? Trek 25-103. So here's Mike Johnson, and let me give you the setup. So for weeks and weeks and weeks, after he became Speaker of the House, he was seeking an audience with figurehead Biden. And for whatever reason, Mike Johnson still calls him president, which is part and parcel of our discussion. I don't know why people continue to call him president. I get it. It's ornamental. It's the official term, but why? Why are we playing word games? So they wouldn't take the meeting. They said that Biden was busy, what with his caps daily and his naps and such, very busy, ice cream time. So finally, Johnson kind of forced the issue. So they set up a meeting. And he goes in as the guy who is second in line to the presidency. If the figurehead had died, or if they had actually recognized the fact that he was a potted plant and moved him aside and had Kamala Harris come in. And if she died or was indicted for being a criminal, then Speaker Johnson would step in. So when he walks into the room, pretty much the whole cabinet's there. The staff, the cackling women who scream, press, thank you. And it's called hotboxing a guy. So, hey, we're going to make sure that you don't get a word in edgewise. We're just going to pressure you on Ukraine. But at least he got the meeting. So here's the part where people have been focusing on the fact that figurehead Biden wasn't running anything. That's not my focus as we look at the deep state.
The president reaches over just like this. We're sitting right next to the fireplace in the Oval, and he grabs my arm and he says, the Speaker and I just need a couple minutes together. Would y'all just leave us alone? And I looked up on the faces of some of the staff standing around the wall, and they're like, oh, no, he did it. So he called it. He's the commander-in-chief. So everybody leaves, and he and I are standing awkwardly in the middle of the Oval Office right over the rug by that coffee table. And I said, Mr. President, thanks for the moments. This is very important. I got some big national security things I need to talk to you about that I've heard, and I think you know, and what do we do? But first, real quickly, Mr. President, can I ask you a question? I cannot answer this from my constituents in Louisiana. Sir, why did you pause LNG exports to Europe? I don't understand,
Look at
liquefied natural gas is in great demand by our allies. Why would you do that? Because you understand, we just talked about Ukraine. You understand you're fueling Vladimir Putin's war machine because they got to get their gas from him, And he looks at me stunned with this, and he said, I didn't do that. And I said, Mr. President, yes, you did. It was an executive order 3 weeks ago. And he goes, no, I didn't do that. And he's arguing with me. I said, Mr. President, respectfully, could I go out here and ask your secretary to print it out? We'll read it together. You definitely did that. And he goes, oh, you talk about natural gas. Yes, sir. He said, no, you misunderstand. He said, what I did is I signed this thing we're gonna conduct a study on the effects of LNG. I said, no, you're not, sir. You paused it. I know. I have the export terminals in my state. I talked to those people this morning. This is doing massive damage to our economy, national security. It occurred to me, Barry, he was not lying to me. He genuinely did not know what he had signed. And I walked out of that meeting with fear and loathing because I thought, we're in serious trouble. Who is running the country? Like, I don't know who put the paper in front of him, but he didn't know.
Thanks to the Free Press for that, Barry Weiss, former New York Times reporter, being bit by bit red-pilled. Hey, Mike, you didn't tell us? You're on a 737 flying across country, and you are a pilot, a commercial pilot, highly rated commercial pilot. And you walk up past the flight attendants, and you see that the door to the cockpit is open. And the pilot and co-pilots have both had heart attacks. And so you shut the door, go to the bathroom, take your seat. Maybe it'll be okay. Maybe they'll revive themselves. Maybe there's a secret autopilot that's going to land the airplane. So you don't say anything to anybody, and you certainly don't go take control of the jet airplane. You just let it keep going. Someone's going to handle it. Let's start with this as sub-item A. The deep state loves itself. Now, Mike Johnson is far better on most things than the Democrats, but he just relied upon the fact, well, the machine's going to keep moving. Yeah, but not in the hands of the person that some people still consider to be president. You owed us that statement. But he didn't want to deliver it for fear, I think. I don't want to provide false witness, but for fear that we might go, oh my gosh, no one's running the country. Well, we knew that. But you could have confirmed it, and in fact, it was your duty to confirm it. In fact, it was your duty at that point to demand the 25th Amendment be invoked and that man be removed from getting to pretend to be president. So this is connected to that. And it has to do with something that the Democrats do, but Republicans take advantage of. The Democrats like to pretend laws exist, or that the invention of a law from the head of a president is law. Supreme Court's happy to go along with that sometimes. I'm thinking about abortion, where they just invented it from thin air. The Supreme Court did that. It was the law of the land. And I think, again, about the magic word scenario, where we've got this debt ceiling and a Social Security lockbox. We don't have any of those things. But they really like being able to pretend that laws exist when they don't. Such as this with figurehead Biden, who, again, as he's speaking these words, we could have already heard from Mike Johnson that this man has absolutely no idea what he signs or doesn't sign.
Throughout my career, I've been clear. No one should be discriminated against based on their sex. And in order for the amendment to be ratified, it requires 3/4 of the states to ratify it. That benchmark was passed when Virginia ratified the ERA a few years ago. Today, I affirm the Equal Rights Amendment to have cleared all the necessary hurdles to be added to the U.S. Constitution now.
So it's play acting. They love to play act that this law exists. Now, you notice how this has just disappeared from the media cycle. It just didn't land. And yeah, there are women who are convinced that this is passed, and even some men. I say women because women are likely to pay more attention to this because it's supposedly protecting, quote, reproductive rights. But it's an act. They're pretending so that people can now have something to be outraged about. This is for the next 2 minutes hate. But Mike Johnson pretends too. Mike Johnson pretended for you that we had a president, play acting every bit as much as the figurehead was play acting. one of the meta-narratives to the deep state is they like being able to put on dramas for us. And that drama is often aimed at everything is okay, it's all right. Mom and dad weren't really fighting, they're just having a discussion. Yeah, dad's moving out, but it's not a divorce, it's just a trial separation. When Republicans involve themselves in this, of course, they involve themselves in a cycle of distrust. Now, President Trump makes it very difficult to say this is all very normal because President Trump has been so aggressive with the executive orders. I don't like governance by executive order. I prefer a Republican form of democracy. But so much of what he's been doing has been undoing what the figurehead did. But at this point, we can look at President Trump signing these things. When he's been asked about them, he knows the specifics of what they are. You don't have to agree with him. You don't have to like him. But we can point to someone with whom the buck actually stops. These aren't being made up. They're going to be fought in court. Many of them are going to be fought in court. We already know that. But the deep state loves the pretense of it's all very normal. I've looked at John Fetterman in a different way. And maybe it's because he's become a more reasonable man. I don't know what's going on with the guy. Praise God that he's become a more reasonable man in some ways. And maybe he's got better political instincts than we thought. But, you know, the hoodie thing that he does, where he wears the hoodie, he did that at one of the official inauguration meetings. And I saw Republicans being outraged about it. Yeah, it's sort of disrespecting the people's house. And it's slovenly. And he looks like a goof. And part of dressing up a convicted or if you're a defense lawyer and you have an indigent client who doesn't have money, one of the things you will do with the court is demand money to dress your client respectfully. So they go out, they get them a decent pair of slacks and a button-up shirt and a couple, 3 ties and a jacket. And they do this because it's this veneer of respectability. I think we're past the point of veneer. So when John Fetterman walks in a hoodie, and unshaven and slovenly, it's not a veneer. I mean, that's how the dude dresses. I think he always has dressed that way. CNN likes veneers. CNN is deeply, deeply tied to the deep state. CNN, in my judgment, lies on behalf of the deep state. Jake Tapper is all over Elon Musk's Heil Hitler salute. You know, the same one that Barack Obama did and Hillary Clinton and everybody else. But CNN loves to be able to lie on behalf of the deep state. And if it takes down an innocent person, so be it. I want you to hear part of the argument in this case with Navy veteran Zachary Young, who's been awarded $5 million because of what CNN did to him. And I'll show you this in just a quick second. I did something this morning in a workout that really speaks to the weakness of the mind. You could say, no, it speaks to the strength of the mind. No, it doesn't. For a while, I've been wanting to bust past a time mark for a 5,000 meter row. And I wanted to get well below 20 minutes, like well below it. But first I needed to break that 20-minute barrier. Now, I should have been able to do that. Super frustrating to me because I know I can run faster than this. I know I've got the aerobic capacity. And yet I haven't been able to really bust that out. So sometimes for mental health reasons, I'll go into my garage gym, I'll turn off the lights, and I'll just row. I'll play music or I'll listen to a book, and I'll row for an hour or so and then look at what the clock says. So today I went into my garage gym, I turned off the lights, and I put up my workout clock, which is it just displays times, and I started it, and I rowed for 20 minutes. And at the end of the row, before I turned on the lights, I thought, well, that sucked. I really underperformed. And I turned on the lights, looked at my rower, and I destroyed the 20-minute barrier. I was probably somewhere around an 18-minute 5K. Just destroyed it. See, the weakness of the mind was I was looking at that meter when I was running my 5K going, man, this split is hard. The point of all this is the weakness of the mind is also the weakness of the body, which is why protocols are so vital for me. Maybe you can exist without them. I can't, not in any healthy way. I want to suggest to you that if you have problems sleeping or with relaxation or with stress, stop the weakness of the mind. The weakness of the mind is telling you this is who I am. There's nothing that can do to change it. And I can pray into it. Yeah, God could lift that from you, but God's affording you the opportunity to hear this now. So go try Magnesium Breakthrough and stack it with Sleep Breakthrough. It comes from bioptimizers.com/Todd. Wade's become a friend of mine, one of the co-founders and CEOs there. They are a highly ethical supplement company, and there's a lot of bad supplement companies. Bioptimizers.com/Todd. You get 10% off all their products. When you subscribe, not only will you never miss product and find yourself without it, you get exclusive gifts and exclusive discounts. It's bioptimizers.com/Todd. So in the case of Zachary Young, someone who wrote for Jake Tapper decided to take a reporter's story and present Zachary Young as having been a black markets profiteer, profiting on the pain of the Afghan people. So they told the story. And Zachary Young is a heartless mercenary, a BlackRock type. So the problem was that was never true. And one of the junior anchors responded with an apology. Jake Tapper never did. During the trial, Jake Tapper refused to answer probably, I think it's 80 to 100 questions. And this is an argument in court. The CNN lawyer doesn't want the network being hit with any punitive damages because they want to be able to continue to lie on behalf of the deep state. Safe is supposed to secure, stay home, stay safe. Hunter Biden laptop is propaganda. Elon Musk is a Nazi, even though, of course, he wears a piece of jewelry to remind himself of October 7th. Did you know that? He does. Here's CNN's lawyer.
You heard General Young, plaintiff's expert, testify, and he kind of made this offhand comment. I thought it was very interesting. He said he was watching the coverage of the wildfires in Los Angeles, which are really heartbreaking. And he said that CNN's coverage was outstanding. And he wasn't wrong. Because when natural disasters break out, CNN is there. And that's hurricanes, that's wildfires, that's earthquakes. When conflicts erupt, like some of the ones we've heard in this case, CNN's there. And providing all of that content, that really important content's expensive. But it has a really tremendous value because we as Americans need to understand what our fellow Americans are going through if they're in California or if they're on the Gulf Coast and get hit by a hurricane, or if there's an earthquake in Northern California, or if there's a war in Ukraine. All those things are really valuable. So you've made a decision that CNN's liable, but that doesn't mean that there isn't a reasonable path forward. So over the next few hours, I hope it doesn't take that long, you're going to hear about CNN's net worth. And you're going to see that the net worth of the company is actually in a subtle decline. You're also going to hear about the headwinds facing the entire media environment. Media is changing really quickly. You're going to hear some of the details about that. CNN still is a valuable asset because of what it does, because of that important information that it delivers. But there are really big challenges that it faces. And you're going to hear that for that reason, almost any amount of punitive damages, and even your verdict right now, will serve as a real punishment. And I'm not coming here to tell you that what you all have done should be the end. You've decided that punitive damages are warranted, so I'm not going to tell you that some number isn't warranted. But I am going to tell you that your judgment has an effect.
So the punitive damages, he argues, just be kind. Okay, let's think about some things. We saw our troops in Syria secretly for the past, 8 years? CNN participated in pretending they weren't there. So it's a live omission. It's the propaganda of silence. And then when it became clear that President Trump was going to be president, all of a sudden, the rebels in Syria had a breakthrough. Well, I mean, with some help with unbelievably well-targeted drone strikes from Israel and America and the scrambling of jets and a massive push to take out the regime. So CNN all of a sudden discovered we got something going on in Syria. And then there's the famous thing, the infamous thing where they lied about this person being a prisoner when in fact they were one of the Syrian torturers. He talked about the coverage of the fires. CNN says it's climate change. Because that's what the regime has said that it is. It's climate change. Jake Tapper has already had a program where he insisted that it's hyperbolic to say that this could have been prevented. You have CNN continuing to pretend that men are women. So in all of these ways, CNN has continued to be a spokesmouth for the former regime and, much more importantly, the deep state. So the punitive damages should say something, and the deep state loves CNN and networks like this being able to lie to people. So President Trump needs to attack this. Now, he's already done more than any president in history to release people of this pretense, this wrong belief that we have an independent media. Praise God. He has sued these companies, and he's won, and he's probably going to win again. So let's do something congressionally to find out why. I want every single email between every single comms person, everyone in government, and anyone working in the media, period. I want them all. And since President Trump loves AI, let's let AI go through and look for some trigger words. Look for some conversations that indicate that the federal government was driving narratives on CNN, because it's my belief that the federal government was, and probably still is to some degree, driving narratives on CNN. On whose behalf are they lying? This subtle economic decline the lawyer of CNN talks about. Yeah, part of that's driven by digital. Part of it's driven by the fact that conservatives don't trust these entities anymore. Another thing that the deep state loves, and we're on item number 3, well, unless you all count Mike Johnson and his love of the entire system, we're on item number 4. The GOP, unfortunately, loves to spy on Americans. The guy that has been chosen by President Trump to run the CIA, John Ratcliffe, he's a big, big fan of Section 702. And so is much of the rest of the GOP. Mike Johnson, of course, had been deeply, deeply, morally convicted against it. It was a great wrong. And then he had a private meeting with the intelligence officials, and he came back and said, it's the single most important thing we can do to protect our country. So here is more proof that the GOP loves this stuff. John Ratcliffe.
FISA, and particularly Section 702 of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, is an indispensable national security tool. There's no other way to get around that. I say that not as a matter of opinion, but as an informed judgment, as in my role as the Director of National Intelligence, being the President's principal intelligence advisor, advising the President in the Oval Office, and understanding that a significant percentage, sometimes more than half, of the actionable foreign intelligence that we provide to the President as the policymaker to act as Commander-in-Chief comes from FISA-derived or 702-derived action. I will say I have supported FISA in that regard, but I've also, as I outlined earlier, understand that it is an important, indispensable tool, but one that can be abused, right, and that we must do everything we can to make sure that it has the appropriate safeguards, because it can't come at the sacrifice of Americans' civil liberties.
What are the safeguards? We don't punish civil service workers. They're nearly impossible to fire. President Trump took a huge step that he took away the security clearances of the 51 intel agents who lied about Hunter Biden's laptop. Praise God, they can no longer, and by the way, this is huge economically for them. I mean, one of the things that they get hired on these boards for is that they know things. They can't tell you the things they know, but they can give you advice based upon the things they know. They can tell you where to invest your money based on which countries we are running surreptitiously. They can go into a boardroom and say, yeah, some careful lobbying here could get you entryway into China to do this, because they know things. They simply can't tell you what they know, but man, they can give you advice all day long based upon what they do know. DC is famous for conversations like this. I can't disclose to you the meeting I've had, but if I were you, I would. So what would those safeguards be? I think it's this. Everyone who handles this data, all of their correspondence should be date stamped. We should be able to go back at any time, all of their correspondence date stamped. We should have a time in the future while they're still living where we can go review their decisions, and if they did anything to create an excuse to spy on Americans without a warrant, they are up for serious felonies with every word they spied on, every email. There's got to be teeth to these things. It's not enough to say there needs to be reform. And in terms of the FISA court, it is a secret court that is uniquely un-American. I understand the reasoning behind it. Well, we need to be able to have these conversations and not have our adversaries know. Great. Then on the topic of the FISA courts, what exactly do they do when intel agents lie to them? Nothing. If you're making a national security case to the Supreme Court and you have a CIA that has said in writing to its agents and operatives, it is okay to lie to the American people. It is okay to lie to courts. The only entity to whom they're not lying is God, because God sees everything. All of these little secret conversations that happen in the dark, God knows about. He knows the motives of the people behind it. That's eternally meaningful to all of us. Justice will be meted out, and it doesn't solve things here. Maybe they're not meant to be solved. So there's a couple other things that the deep state loves. I mean, and we could make an exhaustive list. One of the things it really, really loves, of course, is the pharmaceutical industrial military complex. And sort of interesting, the guy that popped up in the show researchers, I was thinking about who really, really loves this stuff, because they're not our friend. And look, I used to work in and around pharma. And there are some very nice people in pharma. I remember there was a woman, I really got to like this lady who worked at Pfizer Consumer Health. She was a very senior marketing executive. She really helped me get the video thing rolling online, and super thoughtful woman, funny woman. And she talked about what Johnson & Johnson did and what they were doing at Pfizer Consumer Health and their commitment to trying to help people and the funds they set up. And I truly believe that woman had in her heart a need to want to help people be healthy. I really believe that. In fact, she came from a medical background. I think she was a nurse practitioner and ended up being this brilliant marketer. So there's a whole bunch of good people in there, but they get lost. Likewise, I had a meeting once with the advertising team that did a Dove series of commercials where they didn't go out and try to make fat healthy. They simply celebrated the different ways women looked. And my daughter was having an eating disorder at that time, and I sat down with them in this meeting in New York and just said, hey, first of all, as a dad, I really appreciate this series of commercials. And I believe, and I watched their eyes. They all had kids. So I'm not here to say they're all bad people, but they have to operate at scale. Dove cannot afford to do soap the right way. Pfizer Consumer Health can't, because they put out so many products. They have to just absolutely grind everything down to pennies. Allen Soaps doesn't have that because their mission is not an enormous amount of money. They already had that opportunity. John, who runs Allen Soaps on behalf of his sons, he already could have sold to Amazon for a ton of cash, because Amazon looked at the performance of the soap and said, man, if you'd let us just move this over to let us do the manufacturing, we'll get this stuff made in China, but you're not doing enough with your son. You need to put your son in a lot of videos, and we need to he can be a mascot. We'll set up the Allen Foundation, and this is how Bill Gates does it and how Mark Zuckerberg does it, and we'll help you, and your son won't need to work anymore. And John said, no, you missed the whole reason we exist. I want my son to work. Because the soft bigotry of low expectations is because he's nonverbal, he's not valuable. But Allen Soaps exists for that, to employ kids like that, young people like that. We went from 1 to 3, 300% increase. The soap hasn't changed. No, we're not going to make it in China. It's made by a family in the Midwest with 3 generations of soap making expertise. The soap is all natural. The fragrances are absolutely unique because they largely come from the mind of Alan. So they can do things the right way. And you might pay more for the soap. But you get 10% off. So go to allensoaps.com/Todd. You get 10% off all their products there. It's allensoaps.com/Todd. Here's a spokesperson for the pharmaceutical military industrial complex because they are melding. And I could add to that the tech complex. I'm sure you saw the CEO of Oracle in this AI meeting with President Trump saying, hey, if you get sick and you come in and see a doctor, we're going to turn the fantastic AI machine on, and it's going to make a cure for you in 48 hours. You signing up for that? Because, of course, AI knows everything about your body because it took a look at your DNA, because it knows what you eat, it knows the stress you're under, it knows your heritage. It doesn't know any of these things. Here's Mike Pence doing a little, I guess, could I call this subtle bragging, or is this more like overt bragging?
I might have been the first to call on Republicans in the Senate to reject the nomination of RFK Jr. as Secretary of Health and Human Services. You know, there are many aspects of the government that bear upon the issue of life, none more important than health and human services. It was one of the reasons why during our transition in 2016 and 2017, all of our candidates, first and foremost, were supporters of the right to life. Ultimately, our nominee, Secretary Tom Price, would move forward and advance the cause of life. And we made great progress. As you know, you were directly involved in a number of those issues through administrative action. But I understand people's desire to defer to the incoming president and the team that he has around him. But there's a reason why our founders gave the Senate the authority to advise and consent. It's the ability to help shape an administration and in some respects serve as guardrails around what the American people voted for. And I would just say to anyone in the sound of my voice today that the Secretary of Health and Human Services on a month-by-month basis makes more decisions that bear upon the sanctity of life and protections of religious liberty than any other member of an administration except the President of the United States. And so I think it's incumbent on the Senate now, in the Health Committee in the Senate, to ask the tough questions of RFK Jr., to get the answers, but ultimately, my hope is that the Senate will reject his nomination as Secretary of HHS and give President Trump an opportunity to nominate any number of men and women who are eminently qualified to lead health and human services, but also would bring with them a deep commitment to this.
Already been determined that the federal government's out of the abortion business. That came through the Supreme Court, undoing the fake law that was invented by another Supreme Court out of thin air, based upon a constitutional standard that doesn't exist. Unfortunately, privacy is not in the Bill of Rights. Should be. Fourth Amendment hints at it. But of course, that had nothing to do with privacy. So that's already an answered question. RFK Jr. can't do anything to change that. But if you are going to really look at the effects of pharmaceuticals in America, you might look at things like, for instance, and correlation is not causation, but you might look at the unbelievably swift decline in testosterone in men. You might look at the massive decrease in the ability of young people to get pregnant and to maintain pregnancies. And you might begin to map that to an increased dependency on pharma and a certain drug that was shoved into people's bodies through blackmail, which has increased the challenges of giving birth. You might also look at the fact that the wrong sex hormone phenomena, wrong sex surgery, of course, is having the same exact effect. You might also examine industrial surrogacy, which is a replacement for natural birth. Mike Pence is very similar to Mike Johnson. Mike Pence loves the deep state very deeply. Last thing to talk about today that the deep state absolutely loves, and therefore the Team Trump must destroy, is they love vote fraud. Globalists love it, and they rely upon it. The unbelievably conflicted and corrupt Prime Minister of Britain, Keir Starmer, he's decided to start a push to ease ID laws in England. They've been decent. He wants them etched away at. Why? You already know. For the newcomers. It's an obvious, transparent attempt to allow the newcomers to vote, even though they're not allowed to vote in Britain. It's the same thing here. Which brings us right back to the very tip top of this. Speaker Mike Johnson decided to play act for us. Every time he called Joe Biden president, he was play acting. Every time he referred to him using the honorific or acted like he was the guy making decisions, he was play acting. Because the deep state, more than anything it loves itself. It's insular in that way. And if you want to take this to the biblical level, we're to love our neighbors as ourselves, but not in a prideful sense. One of the things God abhors is human pride in all its various manifestations. This is the Todd Herman Show. Please go be well, be strong, be kind, and please make every effort to walk in the light of Christ.